Hi, Chargers fans. My name is Kyle Cantaniano, and this is the Powder Keg Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about Joe Hortiz's approach to the offseason this year. We're going to take a historical approach, look at what he did with the Ravens over his time with them, compare it against Tom Telesco's time, and we're going to use the stark differences between the two to try to predict, forecast how Hortiz might attack this offseason and potentially the next one as well. Now, I know people are saying that because he loves compensatory picks so much, that's going to shape how this offseason plays out. And I agree. If you know anything about me, you know I love compensatory picks. I just think that it's going to have a different impact than a lot of what I'm reading about on Twitter and a lot of predictions I'm seeing. So I wanted to make this video because of that. So let's dive in. Before we do, we're going to need to just go over some quick key terms. A compensatory pick, as you probably know, it's an extra draft pick awarded to teams that lose more compensatory free agents than they sign in a given offseason. So what is a compensatory free agent? Well, it's an unrestricted free agent on an expired contract that leaves and signs elsewhere with another team before the Monday following the NFL draft. It's got to be for a contract that ranks in the top 32 in terms of average per year value. So if it's a one-year deal, $10 million, that's going to be a pretty good value on an APY scale. It's not going to matter if there's a 5-year deal that is worth $9 million per year. It's going to actually supersede that one. It's going to crawl above it a little bit. And then it's going to receive a pick in relation to a round that they think a $10 million deal should be worth. That could be worth about a 5th or a 6th round pick. A cancellation chart is how they take the accounting for all that. They'll take your compensatory free agents that you lost, then they'll take the ones that you gained, and as you cross them off, cancel them out, if you will. If you have a couple names remaining left on the lost section, then you're going to get the picks that correlate with the APYs of those players. Really quick crash course, guys. So let's compare Tom Telesco to Joe Hortiz. They couldn't be more different as general managers. So because of this, the tools that we see in place, even the timing of things that we see happen, is going to be very different under Joe. So let's start with Tom Telesco. When we move on to compare the 11 Ravens off seasons that we can compare directly with Tom's. Okay, so just consider that as we go through this. For Tom Telesco, in his 11 off seasons with us, he's averaged 8 compensatory picks in 11 years. And yes, we're including this year because the 7th round pick that we're getting from Drew Tranquil is because of Tom's offseason last year. So that is included in this. That's less than a pick a year. It averages to around 2 to 3 extra entry-level rookie contracts at any given time when you consider that there's as many as, or those players are signed to 4-year deals, assuming they play out their whole contract. The value of the picks that Tom got was 1/3, thank you, Philip Rivers, 1/5, 1/6, and 5/7. Okay, so it's very heavily backloaded in the 7th round. And it's hard to really count Philip Rivers as good process because he only went and played for the Colts for 1 year. He just as easily could have retired. And we're not going to be letting Justin Herbert walk in free agency to get a 3rd round pick. That's not going to happen. So let's just omit that. Forget about that. It's sense. In 11 years, Tom Telesco signed 31 compensatory free agents. That is a lot of compensatory free agents. It's almost 3 a year. He only went 2 seasons where he didn't sign any compensatory free agents, which was actually his last one, or only signed 1. So that is a very heavy reliance on paying top dollar for external free agents to come to your team and fill holes. Part of his process was doing that because he wanted to go into drafts with as little amount of foreshadowing as to who he was going to pick. He liked to try to fill holes before the draft and wasn't always great at doing so after the draft with the, post, when all the compensatory free agents actually become non-compensatory free agents that they haven't signed yet. Those guys wouldn't have mattered. If you would have been patient and waited for that time to sign, it would have been much more beneficial for our roster. But it's just something he never really got in the habit of doing. Because of that, we only had 6.9 selections per draft. With the addition of 32 compensatory picks, and that's before we get into compensatory picks awarded for staff promotions, that average gets bumped up to 8 selections per draft. Okay, so that means Tom was over was averaging more than one pick less in every draft when graded against his peers. That's a huge bummer. If you look at Pro Football Reference as kind of a great macro level reference for how to grade players and draft picks and success, I really like the AV score. According to Pro Football Reference, Tom's drafts totaled 993 points of AV, or 13.06 approximate value per pick. Okay, let's compare all these stats against Joe Hortiz. He earned 23 compensatory picks in 11 years. It's almost 3 times as many. It's more than 2 picks a year. That's more than 8 potential entry-level contracts. That's cheap, cheap contracts on your roster. At any given time, it's really filling out the bottom portion of your roster. It was very evenly distributed amongst the rounds as well. 4 third-round picks, 8 fourths, 3 fifths, 3 sixths, and 4 sevenths. Very impressive. Only one season in those 11 off seasons netted no comp picks. That's a huge point that we're going to be coming back to. Only 15 compensatory free agents were signed in those 11 years. That's not because Joe Hortiz was just allergic to signing free agents. He often did so in a smarter way, signing players that had been cut or waiting until after the draft. That's just over 1 CFA a year. He went 7 years with 0 or 1 CFA signed. Huge. 9.09 selections per draft. That is more than 2 extra picks per draft than Tom, and it's over an extra pick across the average, league-wide average. According to Pro Football Reference, he scored 1,453 total points of approximate value. And I know you're thinking, okay, Tom had less picks, so did he do better with those picks? Joe had more picks in these later rounds, so did he struggle on a per pick basis? He had a wider prospect pool he had to scout from. Did he struggle in that sense? No, he actually outpaced Tom Telesco's draft picks in a per pick value per pick level as well, which is pretty crazy. Very impressive. So what Joe's history suggests is that he probably doesn't want to go multiple seasons with 0 compensatory picks awarded. That's huge. He will be much less motivated to cut players before their deal expires. And he also won't be afraid to trade players that might be a year or 2 away from hitting free agency if he doesn't see a place for them on their roster now, or if he sees a very strong cap benefit in doing so. Pre-draft, he's going to target free agents that were cut from other teams. 1 or 2 at most compensatory free agents will be on his target list in most years. He'll also focus on eternal unrestricted free agent signings in April or beyond, not March. This is a really key point for where we are right now. Tom often liked to re-sign guys before the new league year, and when the new league year hit, he was kind of allergic to him, avoided him. Think about Kaiser White, Drew Tranquil, Uchenna Nwosu. All those guys left and signed elsewhere for very reasonable contracts that you really should be arguing that we could have retained them for those prices. But once they left, it was almost like Tom really struggled with keeping the door open for players to continue negotiations down the road. That's something that we are definitely going to see change under Joe Hortiz. I can almost guarantee it. Now let's real quick teach you how to read a cancellation chart. This is the Ravens cancellation chart. It's also going to give us an opportunity to discuss some of Joe Hortiz's style and moves. This was the cancellation chart from the 2019 offseason, which meant it affected the 2020 disbursement. As you can see, they had 4 compensatory free agents leaving: Smith, Mosley, Brown, and Suggs. But then they signed Earl Thomas. He slotted in as a 3 when he signed for, I think it was $13.75 million against Smith's $15.75. So they canceled each other out. Ingram was signed to a compensatory level deal. Big bummer, because even though they signed him for a 6th, he was the lowest. He was the closest player ranked to his round was Suggs. So that one got wiped out. They still came away with a 3rd and a 4th. But what that tells you is when you sign players like an Earl Thomas, like a Mark Ingram, that doesn't just have the effect of whatever the budget, whatever your cap hits were, your guaranteed money, all that jazz. they also effectively, it's like they traded a back end of a third round pick for Thomas and a back end of a fifth rounder for Ingram. That's really important to consider in most decisions you're making now that you have a compensatory free agent merchant in Joe Hortiz. Still worked out. They still got a third and a fourth, but it could have been even greater. And, you know, Earl Thomas didn't exactly kill it in Baltimore, too. So, I mean, it goes to show you they probably wish they would have kept that third round pick and money to re-sign somebody else instead of, go back into the CFA well, since Joe doesn't normally do that. Looking at the 1 year that they didn't get a compensatory pick is really interesting because when you look at it, um, they signed Marcus Williams and Moses right away, and they let and then they let Every and Bozeman go, but they weren't going to get that much for them, so it wasn't a big deal. But what's really interesting is they did bring in Michael Pierce, so who was not a CFA, so they still had that mindset. But what you don't see on this cancellation chart is Ricard, Campbell, and Bynes were all let to hit the market. Ricard was signed about a week or two after the new league year started. Campbell signed in April. Bynes signed in April, and Justin Houston as well re-signed in July. So all those players were let go to go test the market out. And there's a chance that the Ravens were on the phone with them as they were collecting these other offers and saying, hey, what are you getting? What's the market looking like for you? We'll match it or something of the sort. And then they know, okay, Campbell came back on a $7 million per year deal. If they knew that Campbell was going to get them, was going to be a CFA lost at around that value, well, he would have wiped out Moses's deal. They would have only gained a seventh round pick. So they basically had a way. Do we want to let Campbell go and have to replace him at that position? He's a very productive player still, because all we're going to get is a seventh. Well, that doesn't really make sense. Let's not go ahead. Let's not do that. Let's go ahead and re-sign him. Joe's going to be much more active in looking at players of our own players in late March and April, maybe even May, and trying to bring them back if they're not getting the deals that they desire. So right now, if I'm Alohi Gilman, Kenneth Murray, Mike Davis, if I'm any of these guys that are leaving the Chargers right now, I hope that Joe isn't only telling them, hey guys, the door's still going to be open as we negotiate. I hope he's actually showing them some of this data, because they've heard that from Tom before, I'm sure, but it wasn't acted on regularly by Tom like it is the Ravens organization. Look at all these guys we re-signed as they were allowed to look at their value, look at the market. Please come back to us. Talk to us about what you're looking to sign elsewhere for, and we might see more value than that. We just want to know what the market might pay, because it is going to affect our compensatory pick bottom line. That is a huge stray from what Tom Telesco has done in the past, and something that I'm very excited about for our roster building in the future. So what does this mean for 2024? Now, a lot of people have been mentioning that they think we're not going to re-sign a lot of our guys right now because they should be going out and getting us compensatory picks. But right now, given that we had a very poor season, and honestly, in my opinion, one of our most valuable free agents is Alohi Gilman. And even though I value him much higher than 3 to 4 million per year, the other experts and sites' opinions have been a little bit lower. A lot of people think that because he's only put 1 year production out there so far, he had a great 2022 as well. If you look at it from the standpoint of the games he started and whatnot, but other GMs aren't gonna look as deeply some of the time, and they're gonna focus on the fact that he was a 6th rounder with measurables that kind of pushed him to that 6th round. The speed measurables aren't there, but when you watch him play, he's so much faster than how he plays or than how he tested. Wayne Gretzky, I'm a hockey guy, as some of you guys may know. He had a great quote that he wasn't the fastest guy, but he wasn't going to where the puck was. He always went to where the puck was going. And Alohi Gilman's the same way. He gets to where the ball is going before it gets there, before the quarterback might even know it's going there. So I think after another year of starting experience, someone like Alohi's value is going to jet up. But right now, general managers might be sitting back and looking and saying, only 1 year starting experience. We want to see another year. I hope he signs for big elsewhere, but that's just something that that Joe Hortiz is probably going to sit on the sidelines, let Alohi test the market. And if the market doesn't give Alohi what he wants, Joe's probably going to come in and give him an offer. It's just my gut. I think the same is going to happen with Everett. Eckler might be going regardless. I'm not really sure with that one. But Michael Davis and Kenneth Murray are also guys that are definitely eligible for that kind of conversation. I don't think any of them have as high of a ceiling of where they could sign for this offseason as Alohi Gilman, except for maybe Eckler. But that's my opinion right there. Sorry, that's my soapbox. But as you can see on this right-hand side, we have so many starting holes that if we are offloading some of these guys, I don't know how Ortiz is going to fill all these holes with just the draft, with just non-compensatory free agents. He's going to have to figure out a way to open up cap space to re-sign guys to make this happen. That's a lot of positions to fill, both starting and reserve roles, heavy rotational roles. And we don't have a bunch of extra draft capital to replenish that. I think a few of those, you can probably count on 3 or 4 of them being filled by our rookies. But that's still going to leave 5 to 6 starting spots and 3 heavy rotational roles that vets are going to have to come in and fill. Can you count on that many post draft signings or players that have been cut by other teams? I don't know. That's a heavy amount to fill. Now, if you look at 2025, just to kind of compare and contrast, I already have, when you guys see my projected free agent budgets, that's spending power. That is money that we can spend when we've already factored in a 53-man roster, our in-season budget, and our draft picks. Obviously, for 2025, the draft picks is a projection. For 2024, I already have the rookie pool slotted in. Now, 2025, we have a lot of free agent budget. So where does that get us to? It gets us to a season where, if you're following me here, our potential for compensatory picks this season that we would gain, that we would earn this season, but then get next year is very low. We're looking at 4th, 7th. And as you saw from Ortiz's past, he wasn't really a 7th round dealer. It's and then if we go to 2025 with all of this budget, we're going to have to reload our roster. Then we're going to miss out on Mike Palmer that might be going and leaving and adding a bunch of valuable picks if we're somehow able to retain them. I'm talking about Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Khalil Mack. If we're somehow able to retain them through this cap-stressed year and let them hit free agency next year. So that's got to be how Ortiz is thinking, what he's prioritizing. So how can I survive this year while getting to next year with many of these guys leaving and earning me those higher compensatory picks that I really want? If I don't spend this money now, I legitimately run the risk of going 2 off seasons where I almost gain no compensatory picks, or I gain a couple, but they're only 7th rounders. What's that going to do for me on a 2-year average? So the more Joe borrows from 2025 and spends it smartly now, I'm not saying crazy restructures like we've seen in the past. I'm saying creating some cap flexibility and then adding some backloaded deals that really get us through this year and then start diving into that budget into next year. It's going to free up our potential for greater returns in the future. So his tough decision is going to be whether or not, as we kind of mentioned, we can kind of skip through this, since the opportunity cost of signing compensatory free agents this year is much less than next year, meaning we could go and sign guys that are worth 3rd, 4th, 5th round compensatory free agent picks this year, the higher priced, higher valued guys, because we're not going to have players exiting our team for contracts that are worth 12, 15, $20 million. So the opportunity cost is much, much lower this year than it is next year. So the current UFAs are impacted, just as I said. A lot of these guys should be negotiating with Ortiz in a way that if they feel like their market is lower than what it could be next year, then their values, their priorities really align with Ortiz's. Somebody like Alohi Gilman would be really, in my opinion, would really benefit from staying with the Chargers, having another successful year, playing with players he knows and recognizes and appreciates, and he knows Mentor's system, He was interviewed by the Ravens in the pre-draft process. He got a good idea of what that system is like, and is it would be excited to go in and play in that system. Um, and next year, after having 2 solid years as a starter, if he just replicates what he did last year, he's going to get paid. Last year, the teams heard the chatter. They started turning their heads. Next year, they're already going to be looking. And a successful year for Alohi is going to get him paid. I project around a $7 million a year contract. So I would be considering that if I'm a Kenneth Murray, if I'm a Michael Davis, if I'm a Gerald Everett. Can I stay in this system for 1 year and rebuild my? If he does cull the roster now and decides to go all in on the free agent market this year, we might expect trades for draft compensation next year. When Joe, in this year that I mentioned before, something that I forgot to mention, when he didn't get a compensatory free agent pick from for the 2023 season, and he knew that ahead of time, well, that was the year in 2022 that he went and traded Hollywood Brown away for a first-round pick. I haven't gone back to look around to see if they traded down and pushed picks into the next year, but it's just important to consider. He realized, I'm not getting the usual extra pick flow that I'm used to, so I'm going to go ahead and get an extra high-value pick by trading away Hollywood Brown now. So I would expect, if Joe decides to go in on the free agent market this year, if we see cap room being opened up for him to make a couple plays, expect trades for 2025 draft compensation as well. Probably for 2024, but whether it's players being traded with future picks in mind as compensation, or trade backs in this draft that net us future picks as well, Joe is going to be incentivized. He's going to mentally be prioritizing finding ways to add extra picks in 2025, since he's not going to get compensatory picks. Now, if he does decide to get as many comp picks this year as he can and go on an all-in spending spree next year with all that cash we just saw, he's certain to let Alohi Gilman, Eckler, and Everett test the market and likely walk. I would hate to see that happen. My counter with Alohi Gilman, because I believe he's a guy that can be a foundational core piece for this team, I hope he signs him for 2 years. If you're going to already decide I'm going all in free agency next year, then bridge Alohi to a 2-year contract while his market still, if this is a big if his market's a little soft when he hits free agency, talk to him about a 2-year deal. If Alohi puts up 2 more years like he had last year, he might be looking at a $10 million a year valuation come the 2026 offseason. Right there, he'd be like a Jordan Poyer valuation when he re-signed with the Bills. So that's my soapbox for Alohi right there. He may sign a single compensatory free agent target, but we'll have to rebuild the roster from cut players and post-draft signings. It's not going to be easy. Players expiring next year, like Mike Williams, Khalil Mack, and even Joshua Palmer, are more likely to get traded. Sorry about that typo, before their deal expires. So now we're going to need to figure out a way to get some extra draft picks that are of value, because we're only going to be bringing in 7th rounders. And we're going to need to get extra selections in this draft, because we're going to need some seconds and some thirds, some players from rounds that you can kind of reasonably expect them to have a good role, a defined role in year one. In Mike Williams' case, I would hate it, but he would probably become a cut casualty if Joe feels like he needs to spend next year and not this year. In my opinion, that is not what I would do. I would target this year as the year to be negative on the CFA balance sheet. Those 7th rounders are not worth it. Restructure things so our big push can be this year. Let's start with Mike Williams. I think he needs to attempt to rework his deal. I've gotten some pushback on this, but I feel very strongly that if Mike Williams hits the free agent market this year, he's not going to make more than about $10 million a year. Odell Beckham came back as a bigger playmaking name, a whole year and a half removed from ACL surgery and recovery after he was a Super Bowl hero for the Rams. And everyone said that $15 million a year was an overpay. Mike Williams is a great player, but I can't think of a time that I have seen a wide receiver sign to an external team for more than $7 or $10 million a year a year before they have fully, a year before their surgery, essentially. So before they've had a chance to get fully recovered and then showcase to the league that they're fully recovered. Guys like Michael Gallup and Chris Godwin, they don't count in my mind because they had produced for the team that re-signed them. They were in the building during their rehab. The general manager and the team and the doctors were able to monitor it every step of the way. They were much more incentivized as a team to keep those guys around. I haven't seen that happen with an external contract, but if anyone else has, please let me know. Hit me up in the comments, Twitter X or whatever you call me, Zeke me, whatever they say it is, and let me know what player that was because I haven't seen it. Instead, I would drop Mike Williams to a $10 million fully guaranteed deal. Why not? Add in some incentives that would pay him next year if he were to hit them. It could be a game started threshold because he's likely not going to. He'd probably start the year on the pup. They'll probably slowly work him in, and maybe they give him an extra. If he's really saying I'm not going to take a pay cut, well, Mike, we're going to get you on the field for 8 games, right? Let's get you on the field for 8 games. It's more you played last year, so we can petition for this to be a incentive that gets paid out next year. So we'll say $5 million. This is purely hypothetical, guys, but $5 million if you make 8 or more games. Okay. It's a way to help push some of that money into the future, keeps him here. And if for whatever reason he doesn't come back right or he gets re-injured, the Chargers are kind of insulated from that risk. I would immediately restructure him once we got him to sign that $10 million deal, or just as we are restructuring his deal to $10 million, make it restructured as on a 5-year, on a 1-year, 4 void year deal to lower his cap hit as much as possible this year. And again, borrow from next year's cap, okay? Because that is a lot of cap. We don't necessarily need all of it. It's our money today, since we're deciding to spend now, is more important than money tomorrow. While we're doing that, extend Keenan Allen. There's ways to extend him to a $28 million a year deal. If he looks at Devontae Adams and says, I want his APY, you can do that with Keenan in a way that gives him enough guaranteed money, keeps his cash flow in the next 2 years greater than what it would have been on his current contract. And there's also enough outs to where Keenan gets a good chunk of guaranteed money now, gets paid now, gets, good money next year, but gives us a really good out after 2 years if we do need to renegotiate with him or restructure the deal. It's there and available, and it saves us around $14 or $15 million this year on this year's cap. I'd be calling on Bosa trades right now. I know you can't execute them yet, but we're going to need to make a decision on whether we're going to trade or cut him. You can't pay a guy $20 million a year to only play, 10 games in 2 years. I believe in listening when someone repeatedly tells you who and what they are. Right now, sadly, Joey is an injury concern. And at $20 million is way too steep, given our cap constraints right now, to run the risk of him having another injury-plagued season. There's too much opportunity cost in spending that money elsewhere. So I would see if anybody would like to trade for Joey. I would explore, because if we were to get really creative and like we did with Mike Williams, offer Joey a fully guaranteed reduced amount of pay. Let's say we did exactly what we did with Mike and brought him to 10 years guaranteed, but then did a full restructure on it. So we pushed about $7 million into next year's budget. We could then trade him to somebody like the 49ers, who could have Joey on a 1-year deal for the vet min, and we would take about a $2.5 million, $3 million hit in our cap this year, but the savings would be through the roof. In doing so, with his cap hit being so low, the 49ers might be all of a sudden okay with giving us a 3rd-round pick for him. And that would be huge. That'd be a huge win for us. I would trade that dead cap, for that 3rd-round pick all day, given the current status of our team. Joey might take something like that if he wants to play with his brother on a team that's ready to compete for a year before departing into free agency. I would assume that per the rework deal, they would just erase the last year of his contract. It would be a 1-year rental for San Francisco. They could always try to extend him after the fact. But the reason why that's an attractive deal for San Francisco and for Joey is if he wants to play with his brother for a year while they're in a win now window, that's pretty much the only way they can do it unless San Francisco takes on the backloaded void year deal to keep his cap hit as low as possible this year. Getting him on a vet min deal for San Francisco would be pretty huge and would benefit all parties in my mind. Or you just cut him, let him go sign a new deal if he doesn't have any trade value to other teams. Explore Mac's trade market. At this point, I love Khalil Mack. I would love to have him stay on this team. But the benefits of trading him in terms of his cap and being somebody that with his current cap savings, which would get pushed to his next team, he's one of the only guys we have that with no restructure done, he's valuable to somebody. Somebody's going to look at him and go, if we go and trade for him, maybe a second, a third, a fourth, and then let him walk next year, he's going to get us he's going to get us a 5th round pick. He can't get more than that because compensatory free agents, this is devil in the details, that have played 10 accrued seasons can't get you more than a 5th round pick unless they're a quarterback. So that's where his compensatory value is capped. But still, they know they're going to get something back. They can always re-sign him as well. And a player of his caliber on a $23 million salary is worth something to a team that is in a compete now window, or is somebody that actually has cap space and wants to bring him on to mentor a new, younger nucleus of players that they've drafted and are developing. I would re-sign Louis Gilman to a 1-year deal, if not longer, structured with void years to keep his cap hit as minimal now as possible. And I would stretch those void years to the full 5 because I'm still going to want to re-sign Alohi next year. And if I keep him on my team, then those void years that I've added on and spread out are going to stay in place for the duration of his deal. And it could only increase his cap hits. Restructuring him now, even though it frees up cap space, is only going to equate to an extra, $5, $6, $7, $800,000 in each year's cap if he's extended. Mentor and staff are going to need to determine whether Michael Davis, Kenneth Murray, and Kenneth Murray are worth prove-it deals if they think they can plug them into their system as a starter or as a heavy rotational player and increase their value so they can leave next year and earn more money than they would have this year and positively affect our compensatory formula that way. I would do the same thing on the offensive side of the ball with Gerald Everett. I'm sorry. This is a quick breakdown of what those moves would ultimately do. Joey Bosa gave us, when you consider you'd have to replace him with a player as well, just about 13.5 net savings. I have him in here as a cut because I know Joey taking a pay cut is probably not likely. I just think it's a really cool hypothetical, but I wouldn't be budgeting or planning for that. The nice thing about cutting him now is we'll take his accelerated cap hit, which would be which frees up $33 million next year. If they want to free up more money this year, which they could, and through Mike Williams and Keenan Allen's deals, basically new deals, they could potentially push another $7.5 million into next year in dead cap and save more money this year. But I just list this because this is what they would need to do if those two other deals didn't happen yet. And I know I'm still counting on Mike taking a pay cut, so I can't really say if that's realistic or not. But so for the time being, I do have the dead cap accelerating this year. With Khalil Mack getting traded, that's going to free up over $23 million. With Derwin James, I would consider restructuring Derwin, but I would wait to do it until later if we need to pull that lever to open up some more cap for additional moves. Extending Keenan should open up about $14.5 million, and then re-signing Alohi Gilman, Michael Davis, and Gerald Everett to prove-it deals. Which again, there could be flux there. I see Alohi as worth a little more than that. Everett might get a little more than that. I don't know, but it gives us kind of a good round number. Murray, I'm not willing to commit to. Mike's deal, if structured the way I suggested, would free up $17 million. So all of these deals would free up about $70 million for the Chargers, which would give them spending room of about $26.5 million. As far as next year's cap, we currently have $97 million in spending, and we would be over. Gosh, I can't see it because of this. I don't know if you guys can see what I'm looking at right now, but I have a slide number in front that's blocking my view. There we go. This would still open up because of Joey's cap clearing, even after Keenan's money hits. Derwin's money, if we do restructure him, and Mike's restructure, all that dead cap that we could take on actually ends up still netting us more budget to work with next year because of Joey's release. Now going over the adjusted cancellation charts. Now we've moved Alohi, Everett, and Gilman. I've even added Kendricks over here because to get cap compliant right now, people are listing him as somebody we need to cut. I think if we were to adjust this budget like I have, there's a good chance we try to retain Kendricks. We could also do a max restructure to, again, borrow from next year's budget to retain him this year to just open up some cap. But I don't think we necessarily need to, which is what I've worked out so far. Our starting holes have gotten filled a little bit because we've filled CB1, even though Michael Davis shouldn't be considered a CB1 right now. He's reduced the need to go out and find one. I still want to upgrade that position, probably through the draft, but I'm not as desperate to do so if Minter tells me, hey, I can make this guy work. He's had good starting years before. Let's run it back with him and Zont on the boundary, or Zont move to nickel and then find a new boundary guy. Everett is TE2. I still have TE1 on there, and safety's taken care of with Alohi Gilman. In my opinion, he's a very productive starting safety. So I wouldn't feel the need to add a starting caliber safety. I would try to get a depth guy still, but I would not be targeting a starter. Free agent budget is now $26.5 million over minimum spending and allocations we already have for in-season budget, rookie signings, and that sort of thing. So let's just run a hypothetical. Let's say that we do go in the spending spree and we get Hunter Henry. I used contract values per A to Z Sports' top 105 contract predictions. That's a self-plug. My buddy Josh and I took care of that for A to Z Sports. Had a great time doing it. I'm using the values that we worked on together to kind of estimate how we could do this. I did adjust the year one cap hits because Josh and I were essentially trying to show what a team desperate to be in win now mode how they could structure the year one cap hits. I did what would more be a realistic take, not using void years for us. So Hunter Henry, 2 years, 15 million, 17 or 7.5 per year. His year one cap hit could very easily be 4 million. DeAndre Swift as our running back 1. Our running back 2 would be a heavy rotational guy too, basically 1A, 1B. 4 years, 22 million is my projection for him. First year cap hit is 3.5 million. I'm not big on, I haven't gotten into scouting guys and Minter's scheme and Roman's scheme guys. So forgive me if you look at these and know more than I do and say, Kyle, that's not a scheme fit. I'm just trying to articulate examples. So if there's another defensive tackle that you see worth these numbers, go ahead and plug them in on your own. This is more trying to articulate the roster management, financial side of it. So forgive me if some of these seem like funky fits, but I'd really like to go and get a solid defensive tackle. Let's say Grover Stewart. Typo. Sorry about that. 3 years, $27 million. First year cap hit would be $5.5 million. Lloyd Cushenberry, 3 years, $36 million. Boom. We got the tier 1 center on the market. He's only 26, and we signed him through his age 29 season. That's killer, right? 26, 27, 28. I think he actually hits the market on the right side of 30. So he might even get us a compensatory pick down the road. And lastly, I'm getting a rotational edge that's a buy low guy because he's had injury issues. I hope to upgrade this position through the draft still, but now I have a guy that can take the pressure off Thule from being the guy on day one, or this rookie as well, and just have a really solid 3-man rotation for as long as Carl stays healthy. If we make all these moves, we still have $4 million in spending power. That's a huge deal. And we can still tap into somebody like Justin Herbert if we want to restructure his deal, or Eric Kendricks, like I mentioned. There are still levers to pull here. But if we made all these moves, I don't know if we need to open up that much more cap space, to be honest with you, for our post-draft signings. Because for every player we sign, it's only going to be whatever that player's worth minus 800,000 against that cap, essentially, against that 4 million, essentially, because they're going to be replacing contracts that I already have budgeted in there. Now, our cancellation chart for next year, our numbers getting a little bit thinner now, a little exciting because we've properly spent this money And now we've bridged Mike Williams to this year where he can go and get paid. If Mike goes and gets paid, if Mike has a bounce back year like he should with Justin Herbert as his quarterback, there's a very good chance he goes and signs a 2 or 3 year deal at like a $23 million valuation. Think Christian Kirk when he went and signed with the Jacks. He got the Cardinals a 3rd round pick, and I have a hard time believing that Williams couldn't do that for us if he hit the market. Morgan Fox, I don't really know what Morgan's market could look like or if he's going to be around with us because I've heard people don't see him as a scheme fit. That is what it is. Zont could go and get anywhere from 12 million to 16 or 17. I wouldn't be surprised. He's kind of a wild card. I'd plug him in at a 4th, maybe a 3rd, but you heard my voice raised there. I don't really know if he's going to get us a 3rd, but I feel pretty safe at 4. Josh Palmer, $8 to $10 million a year, a 5th round pick seems realistic. Kendricks probably at 5 or 6 now that he's getting older, looking more like a 7th round pick. Michael Davis, with a bounce back year with his history of having good years as a starter, could vault back into the $5 or $7 million 1 or 2 year deal range, looking at like a 5th or a 6th. Gerald Everett, maybe he gets 4, 5 if he has a bounce back year as our TE1B, maybe a 7th. Alohi Gilman, I'd put him right at a $7 million contract after 1 more year of great play, maybe even 8 or 9. Sky's kind of the limit for Alohi, I think. I could see very easily 5th or 6th round pick value for him. So that's pretty much where it gets us. This number also accounts for Slater taking up about $20 million with his 5th year option and all of the other transactions that we discussed on the previous slide when we were grading the 2 cancellation charts. So let me know what you guys think. I feel really strongly about this concept of trying to get through this off season with opening up some budget, really going all in this off season, bridging the gap from now with our cap troubles to next year by getting creative with some of our contracts, by getting some trades happening, and by making some painful cuts. But in doing so, the returns, right? Just looking at this, if Hortiz decides to even pick up 1 or 2 CFAs, but they're not the top level CFAs, there's a very good chance that we still end up getting a 3rd, a couple 5ths, and a 7th. He can still max out the total of 4 compensatory picks that you're allowed to get in a given season. So this gets me really excited for what the Chargers could do. It also doesn't account for post-draft prove-it-year players and vets that we could bring in, or guys like Eddie Jackson or anything like that if they choose to go that route. That could be, if they're on 1-year deals, immediately slotted into next year's cancellation chart. So let me know what you guys think. I think this is probably a path that Hortiz is trying to take us down right now, loading up this year and planning on not going as heavy on CFAs next year, and really trying to retain some of our in-house talent, bridging to 2025. Well, thanks a lot for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. This kind of roster breakdown stuff is going to be more of what Ryan Watkins and I hope to bring with the Powder Keg podcast. So I'll see you all soon. Have a great one.